Hello everybody, welcome to the Mild Rumpus, coming at you live from the House of Flimsy, my dilapidated one-bedroom apartment that is filled with books and noise. Today we're going to be looking at all of the books that I read in the month of April. I am having the most difficult time accepting the fact that we are now in the month of May and that April has come and gone. Like, what? What? I actually had to reshoot the introduction to this video because I said today we'll be looking at all the books I read during the month of March. Like, in my brain, we should be going into April, not May. And it's not a case of, well, time sure flies when you're having fun, because I don't know about you, April was not a lot of fun. I started off really strong. 2 books in, I hit a speed bump and I entered a reading slump. I didn't know if I was going to get out of it. I mean, it was rough. In the end, I read 10 books for the month. The problem is 2 of those books were 2-star reads and I read them back to back. And that's what sort of made my reading month miserable. Okay, let's go through the books. We'll go in the order that I read them in. I'll share my thoughts and hopefully save you a little bit of grief. Now, this month saw the release of one of my most anticipated reads of the year, and that is James by Percival Everett. Everyone is talking about this book, and it deserves the attention it's getting. It is a fantastic book, one that you should definitely pick up soon. If you're not familiar, James is a retelling of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain, a book I had surprisingly never read in its entirety. And I thought, well, in preparation for reading this book, I should read the original story, and I'm really glad that I did. And I would suggest that if you are going to read James, it's a good idea to do that. Read the original source material, because it will give you a really deep appreciation for what Percival Everett does, not only with the characters, but especially with the language and the way that characters speak. And there's also a big gap in the story where Jim goes missing for a while, and Percival Everett fills in those blanks with the book James. This was a really great way to start the month, and then things took a nasty turn. Day is a novel that is written by Michael Cunningham, an author that I have read and followed for years. It follows 2 families the year prior to, during, and after the pandemic, but on the same date, April the 5th. And I thought, oh my God, I'll read this book on April the 5th. Won't that be fun? It was not fun. I think my biggest problem with this book is that it has very little plot. Not much happens. And if that's the case, then you had to be really invested in the characters, and I didn't care about a single one of them. I mean, they were all unhappy before the pandemic, so you can imagine once COVID hits, it's just them wallowing in their own misery for 300 pages, and I did not care. The next book that I picked up is by A.K. Blakemore, who wrote The Glutton, one of my favorite books that I've read this year. This is her debut novel. It's called The Manningtree Witches, and methinks I was bewitched, because I could not stay awake reading this book. I could not get through a single page without dozing off. Now, unlike Michael Cunningham's Day, this book actually has a plot. Stuff happens. The problem is, you already know the story. You can tell she did her homework. She definitely does research. And if you're looking for a historical novel of the Salem witch hunts, this might be your jam, but the jam wasn't jamming for me. And to read these 2 books back to back, luckily Tommy Orange came in and saved the day with his latest book, Wandering Stars. This is a sequel of sorts to his previous book, There, and it is fantastic. If you are looking for a good book club pick, I would recommend this one. There is so many topics that are covered, and the characters are the polar opposite of the characters that were in Day. These characters are layered and interesting, and promise you will be completely engaged in the storytelling of this book. This book discusses and explores so many topics, and it's done seamlessly. It never feels like he's pandering or kind of like checking off the boxes of like, oh, we're dealing with this issue, and now we're dealing with this issue. It is a great book, and I highly recommend this one. I not only wanted to keep that mojo going, I genuinely needed to keep the mojo going. So I listened to so many of you who recommended this duology. A lot of you reached out and said, hey, I think you'll enjoy this book. I really dug it. I think you will too. So I picked up Becky Chambers' Monk and Robot duology. The first book is called A Psalm for the Wild Built, and the second book is called A Prayer for the Crowned Shy. The story is really simple. Basically, there's a moon-like planet where man and machine have decided to part ways. And it wasn't a nasty divorce. There wasn't, this great falling out or this crazy war or anything. But one day, a monk who is a tea monk, basically they go from city to city and town to town and do some sort of tea ceremony and listen to people discuss their lives and their problems, sort of like a therapist in some ways. But this person is feeling a lot of unrest and is not satisfied with their life and with their occupation, and they're kind of going through a crisis. And so they decide, instead of going into the next city, I'm going to make a U-turn. I'm going to go through the forest. And in that forest, they encounter a robot, and the robot asks the monk, what do you need? In the first book, the robot is helping the monk find their way, both literally through the woods, but also on a spiritual and philosophical level. In the second book, the monk is helping the robot find their way in this human world and continuing to explore that question as to what are our needs. And they're both really quick reads. Again, you could finish them in a day or two, but they're great. They are. They're as good as everybody said they were. There's also a reading event that takes place in April called People April, where you're encouraged to read memoirs and bios, and I wanted to take part in that. And so for that event, I decided to read Whoopi Goldberg's new memoir, Bits and Pieces, My Mother, My Brother, and Me. This is a wonderful book. If you are a fan of Whoopi Goldberg, it's a must-read. If you're not a fan of Whoopi Goldberg, I don't know. I would suggest checking it out from the library or, picking it up somewhere, because she reveals things in this book that I don't think she's ever talked about before. And you really get some insight as to who were the people that shaped her life. She shares those lessons and you really get a sense of what makes her tick. And she's very vulnerable in the book, and it tackles grief and death and the importance of having those difficult conversations with your family. I thought it was a fantastic book. I read it in a single day. I could not put it down. I think that people are going to be reminded of what a great writer Whoopi Goldberg is. The next book I read is another upcoming release. This is Goyhood by Reuven Fenton, and this book will forever have a special place in my heart and in my collection because it was the first book that has ever been sent to me by the author. So thank you, Reuven, and congratulations, cuz you wrote a really great book, and I'm not just saying that. If it sucked, I would have told you. It's about two brothers whose mother unexpectedly dies, and she reveals this big secret that just kind of pulls the rug out from underneath one of the characters. And it makes them question everything about who they are, who they thought they were, their identity, their religion. The two brothers could not be more different. And it is funny. It's poignant. I really did. I genuinely enjoyed the novel. It might have been helpful to have like a glossary of the Yiddish words, or, just some like basic, this is what we're talking about. But I was still able to enjoy the book. And there are some notes, Bible verses that are translated by the author, and then song references and book references. But I liked it. It was a 4-star read. And the last book I read this month is a very popular sci-fi series that has just recently been adapted into a Netflix show. It's The Three-Body Problem. And I will say that this is a book that focuses on a planet with 3 stars, so that's what it got. It got 3 stars. I am very curious to see how Netflix adapted this into a series, because I couldn't even really summarize the story to you if I wanted to. This is science fiction with the emphasis on science. I don't know if the science is real. I don't know if the author just made this up, but I have never felt more dumb in my life reading a book. I'm imagining that this is basically exposition to book number 2. Not having read book number 2. But, I was expecting a lot more, that's not what this book is. And shout out to Ken who translated this book, because I mean, I can't even imagine. And maybe that's why he didn't do book number 2. He did do book number 3, but for some reason, the second book is translated by someone different. But I don't want to turn you off from the series because I intend to read book number 2. But, you know, exposition. So that was my April. Like I said, it really was a hodgepodge of great books and kind of books. But May is going to make up for it. I've got a really good feeling about May. I have some great books lined up. I already started reading the first one and we're off to a good start. So I'll be sharing my TBR on Wednesday of next week. So be on the lookout for that. And please tell me what you've been reading. Like I said, I wouldn't have known about that Monk and Robot duology had you guys not recommended it. So tell me what you've been reading. My TBR list is growing every day. And while you're at it, please and thank you. The algorithm is always hungry and it's always free to subscribe. I hope you find some good books. And until next time, happy reading.